as you can see behind me, we have this empty building, but really it is not an empty building. What it actually is the studios of 2JJ. This is where I will make my report tonight on radio and reception with 2JJ.
When one enters the office of 2JJ, you can't help noticing the state in which it's in, with its tapes and papers piled all over the place. It appears that either a lot of work is being done or neglected. John Garray speaks to Sue Hoffman on her part at 2JJ.
Tell me, what actually is your part in the show?
My part in the show is just to back up for the announcer, and also technical production, organising tapes, editing tapes, putting tapes together, finding people to interview, and just a general format of the show.
And how long does it take you normally to put a show together?
Well, I start about 9 o'clock in the morning to get to air at 12:30. I mean, it doesn't always take that long, but sometimes it does.
Do you only have one show?
Yes, I do.
And what days are they held on, or is it just on each individual day?
Lately I've been floating around a bit, but my show is 12:30 till 4 weekdays, Monday to Friday. Occasionally I work a mid-dawn or change, work a weekend shift and have a day off in the week. I mean, it's not essential for the producer to be at the show all the time.
So you're just the producer who puts the show together, is that right?
Well, yes. Our music's put together by a programmer, but interviews and stuff I organise. And then I work in the studio with Kerry.
Friday the 13th in Sydney. Friday the 13th. Alice, a song for you. She's stepping out tonight. Go to hell.
Sue's job is mainly to get the show together, and that's as far as it goes for Sue. The announcer is the person who controls the show and is responsible for its presentation to the listener. I spoke with Ivan Walker.
Yeah. The controls you have in front of you, could you explain?
Well, this is a fairly much a conventional basic radio studio. Panel sort of doesn't really hold any surprises. These metering devices are just sort of measuring the sound output. You keep an eye on that to make sure that the VU meter needle doesn't go too far into the red. Exactly what happens if it does, I'm not entirely sure. Somebody will be able to tell you more specifically about that. But it's just, that's just to balance the sound, really.
What if it went dead?
If it went dead, guess you panic. Ring for help.
Do you have anyone who could maybe fix it while you're on the air?
Well, being sort of very much under Auntie's skirts, we are in the basement of the ABC building. There's always a technician we can find doing maintenance. That doesn't really happen very often. I can't really remember having broken down for a long while. There is a standby studio. This is if something went drastically wrong in here, you just pack everything up and move next door.
But this building is not where you transmit from, is it?
The transmitter, unfortunately, is out in the sticks somewhere.
And so how does the signal get from here to there, would you know?
By landline, yeah. Now that recently got dug up by a bulldozer or something, and we did go off the air for a while. But it's just sort of like a landline thing to the transmitter. I don't think there's much really involved in that. It's just like a telephone cable, from what I understand.
So there could only be really 3 places where it could go wrong, either here in the studio, on the line, or at the transmitter itself.
Yeah. It's fairly common, I think, from my experience working radio stations, that there are breaks in the cables between the studio and the transmitter. Happens quite a bit. Somebody disconnecting you or breaking the line by accident.
I don't suppose the commercial stations would have such a thing, would they?
How do you know?
Like a land line going.
Yeah,
do they?
I mean, all the transmitters, most of the radio stations in Sydney have transmitters all in one place, which I think is Homebush, and they would all have to get their signal from the studio, most of them being in the city, to the aerial transmitter mast thing arrangement. and they'd all meet a line from the studio, yeah, for sure.
Do you think that, you know, if let's say something happened with the commercial radio, you know, there'd be more heads flying there than what there would be at a government station?
Would lose money. It's probably the sales department would get uptight about it. Yeah, while they were off the air, they wouldn't be making the dollar.
Yeah,
which is what they're there for.
So they've got a lot more worries then.
Well, of a different kind. Alice Cooper, Go to Hell. Title track from the Alice Cooper album, and also the name of the new Alice on the Road show in America. 18 to 9, 2JJ on a Friday night.
Although the controlling by the DJ doesn't necessarily go wrong, there is always the possibility that the attitude by the DJ contributes to the quality of the show. I spoke to Bob Hudson, who has a reputation of being disorganised and untidy.
Well, I don't know. I tend to see other radio stations as being more organised. One of our faults is that they're disorganised.
Yeah, but I suppose that would attract a lot of people, wouldn't it?
What?
You know, being freer.
No, I think that broadcasting, like entertaining or anything else, is an art that you have to work at. And I mean, you get people who perform on stage who look incredibly totally casual.
Yeah.
And they look casual because you don't know that they've practiced doing that for the last 15 years. And it's the same with radio. I think some of the best people on radio, like Ted and Lex on Double J, both, I mean, they do what comes across as an incredibly sloppy program, but they know what they're doing, so that, you know, they're actually trying to do that. If they want to do a tight program, they can do one. And I think you can't afford to look on being casual and loose as doing it from the bottom. You've got to get up to a level of shit-hot professionalism and then be able to drop down from it virtually for the effect of being casual.
Yeah, that way you can achieve it properly.
Yeah,
and get it across the viewer.
It's like any other art, that you learn the technique first, and then you do something extra on top.
You've got a regular show, have you?
Yeah.
Bob Hudson is well known for his use of free language and his casual approach to the radio. I spoke to Ron Moss, who is the manager of 2JJ, on this topic.
Listening to the station, I know that there have been a few casual words being said, you know, a lot of free language. Could that contribute as well to perhaps the ratings, you know? Like a commercial station would be much more restricted in what's being said on air.
No, I don't think the use of any language will contribute to ratings. The attitude of the station is what contributes to ratings, and our attitude in that area is to talk as honestly as we can to the audience, and that includes the use of four-letter words.
Yeah, which is free language. Okay.
The people we aim at use them themselves many times a day, so, you know, if we're talking to them, why shouldn't we use them as well?
That's right, so come down to their level and they'll accept the station a lot more than the commercial station.
Well, I don't see us coming down to their level necessarily, but we'll communicate on their level.
Yeah. How long has it been operating for now?
We went to air on the 19th of January 1975, so I suppose a bit over 18 months now.
So that was under the control of the Labor government then?
Yeah, it was set up at the invitation of the Labor government cabinet to the ABC.
And what about the Liberals cutting of spending now, government spending? Has that hit 2JJ at all?
Yeah, it's affected the entire ABC. The government can't cut spending in any specific program area. They can only cut the ABC's overall budget, and those cuts are being felt by every department in the ABC, including ourselves.
Well, you've now seen what happens at one of the government radio stations. What I'm going to do now is take you for more or less a tour through 2SM, which is a commercial radio station, and we'll just see how different it is, and we'll contrast the two stations. I'll go in there and I'll talk to one of the managers, the manager, and I'll talk to a technician and one of the disc jockeys.
When I first stepped inside 2SM, I was surprised to see how elegantly it was decorated, with geometric wallpaper and red carpet throughout. The first piece of contrast I noticed was the dress of the employees. It was casual but not outlandish like that of 2JJ. My first stop was with Gavin Rutherford, who is the manager of 2SM.
How long has 2SM been in operation?
Well, John, it's actually started on Boxing Day 1931. That's when it came on the air, so whatever that adds up to in years, that's the number of years we've been on the air.
That's a fair amount of time.
Mm.
Has it been very successful?
Well, over the years, I suppose in toto, yes. We had a lengthy period in the early days of radio when it had a good deal of appeal. You'll remember some of the early Jack Davies stuff and so on. Then it went through a slump, and then it's come back up again.
Have you been the manager of 2SM for very long?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. So how has it gone ever since you've come in then?
Well, I should explain when I say that I've been manager for 6 weeks. I've actually been employed by 2SM for 17 years, but I've been in Newcastle operating the stations that we own up there, and I came back again about 6 or 7 weeks ago. Now, how successful is 2SM in the last 6 weeks? I'll tell you at the end of this week. We're getting a survey result, which will be our second survey of the year, third rather, and we should know again how we're going. This happens every 10 or 12 weeks.
Well, what's its position in the ratings now?
2SM is still number one.
Number one. And what age group is this at?
Well, it's across the board from 10 to 39. In the surveys, the audience is broken up 10 to 17, 18 to 24, 25 to 39, and so on. And 2SM is highly successful 10 to 17, 18 to 24, and also we're running, I think, about number 2 or number 3, 25 to 39. But as a total audience group, we're after the audience 10 to 39.
Is there any particular time that these audiences listen?
Well, obviously at night time is mainly sort of, say, 16 to 24.
More or less the teenagers, young adults.
Yes, that's right. And drive time, 3 o'clock till about 7, tends to be younger again. The daytime is mainly younger housewives, women with little children up to, say, their middle 30s.
Have you rostered the disc jockeys for these times?
Yeah, this happens. It's called day parting. It's a radio expression that means you cut your day up into set parts, and then you would try to analyse who is available to listen at that time, and then you apply the program and the announcer that you require the disc jockey to reach that audience.
So I imagine that then again they aim for those audiences.
Yes, you gear your program to get, we'll take 9 till 12. You gear your program to reach an audience of roughly married with children, 24 plus.
More or less the housewives, would you say?
Yes. Although then you have to break that up too. If you just say 24 plus, well, obviously there's a good deal of difference between a woman who's 24 with a 1 or 2 year old child and a woman who's 40-something with teenage sons.
Oh, yeah.
So you gear your program to reach an audience that specifically can be described as young, interested in life, young children, interested in all the problems that they have with children.
Could I ask a couple of things about the financial state of 2SM?
Well, you can try.
Well, how is it located financially, would you say?
Very good.
Very good. Is the annual profit on an increase?
Yes, it has to be. Radio gets more and more expensive as the years go by. Today we have a staff of 84. 17 years ago, I hate dealing in histrionics, but it was about 60, I suppose.
60.
So it takes now 84 people to do what we were doing with 60, and of course 84 require, well, if you go back 17 years, obviously the salaries are better than they were.
I suppose that the more staff is because of an increase, would it be?
Well, it's because it's getting so specialised. The production facilities that are required in a radio station these days are a lot more involved than they were 17 years ago. The news stuff in a radio station to really provide a comprehensive news service requires a lot more people. Although in certain areas we've probably cut down in the scheduling operation. We're computerised now, whereas 17 years ago we weren't, and it was a manual task. So there are areas where it has been trimmed and other areas where, and mainly in the creative area, it's increased in numbers. In the mechanical side of radio, it's probably reduced.
Yeah. Could I ask what the commercial rate would be of the station?
Yes. I can give you what's the base rate. The base rate is what we would charge for one 30-second announcement in a prime time, such as breakfast. At 7:30 on Friday morning for one announcement on 2SM would cost you $80.
$80.
But most people don't buy radio that way. We have various packages that allow you so many breakfast spots and so many morning and so many afternoon. And you could probably get the average rate down to about, say, $35.
Will be good. It's much cheaper than television.
Oh yeah, indeed it is. But it's a different form of medium. With one TV spot, you probably have more effect than you do with one
That's right.
radio. So you need more radio spots to do the job.
Well, what about the profits of the station? Are they spent more on entertainment, or would you say the news? How do, put it this way, how do your news reports come in? Just like have somebody who's overseas who
Well,
relays the news to you, or do you sort of go in shares with NBC News or something like this?
No, well, what we tend to do, we have stations that cooperate with us, and then on specific stories we pay them a fee.
I see.
So there's stations in Los Angeles and New York and so on that we can deal with at the time we want to deal with them, rather than on any sort of permanent basis. And we also have a cable service with UPI, AAP coming in from overseas.
Yeah.
We have our own reporters right around Australia, stations that cooperate with us.
Do you have your own reporters overseas?
We have specific people in London, in Rome, and in Hong Kong. Don't ask me why that is so, it's just developed that way.
All right then. Well, back to the original question. Do you think more has been spent on the news?
The news
than
is the most,
entertainment?
but relative to time spent on air, if we assume news represents 5 minutes an hour and 55 minutes is music and other activities, then if you take the cost of 5 minutes relative to 55 minutes, news is the most expensive item on the air.
At 2JJ, we did try to find a technician, but they were as scarce as hen's teeth. However, at 2SM, we spoke to Rain Van Poke, who is one of the technicians.
Are you the only technician here, or?
Oh no, we're about 6 technicians.
Six others
altogether. Yeah.
Have you had any problems lately with the equipment?
No, actually, the equipment at the moment is very reliable, all solid state, of course. The only problems we do have would be mechanical problems on tape recorders. But preventative maintenance, fixes all that up, and we have no problems at all, really.
Have you had any major problems with the station?
No, never.
What about the transmission process involved? Well, could you explain that?
Yeah, sure. It starts in one of our 2 studios. Our announcers play their own records normally, except in the morning Bob Rogers is a panel operator. From the studio it comes through this master control room here. Then it goes along 2 telephone lines to our transmission site in Homebush.
What do you actually do here in this control room?
In this control room, behind me here is a patch field where a lot of lines come in, interstate lines, to the sports ground, cricket, that type of thing, you know. We control that. We control here the final levels of the program going on those telephone lines to Homebush, to our transmission site. And that's all that's happening in the control room, really. In the old days, they used to have a man sitting here manually controlling this level, but that's being taken care of by pretty modern equipment, automatic gain control amplifiers, so it's all fully automatic. Another thing, at the moment, our latest development, we are the only station to do this, we have an automated system, which is a computer that, in which we program our, some of our programs, Midnight to Dawn, Early Breakfast, and it plays reel-to-reel machines as we program them, and cartridges.
Does that mean that through the night there doesn't really need to be anybody here looking after it?
That's right.
It can just go by itself?
By itself.
Has it cost the station a fair bit?
Costs a lot of money.
Was it installed recently, or is it?
Yes, it has been in since last November.
Has it been easy for you to maintain?
It hasn't given us any problems at all. No problem.
How many studios do they have here?
We have 2 studios, a news booth, then we have also a country news service. That's a separate service again. Goes to 6 country stations. That's a separate booth again. Downstairs we have recording facilities, a production unit, where we have an 8-track recorder, an 8-track console, and a 4-track studio.
So I'd say that 2SM then does their own tapes then.
Yeah, we do our own shows.
You wouldn't know if they employ a band to do their music, do you?
Well, we do, not a band, but certain groups come in, on a regular basis, but as things go along, we have facilities for that, you see.
As seen at 2JJ, the announcer is the person who played the records, did the jingles and other broadcast work. But at 2SM it's slightly different. Bob Rogers has his own panel operator who does the work for him. I spoke to Paul Newland.
Could you tell me what you actually do here?
Yeah, well, I'm Bob's panel operator. Basically, I just play his records and commercials, and that's just about all. I tell him things to do, like when he's got to read a live commercial, what the next record is, things like that.
Could you explain a little bit about what's in front of you?
Yeah, I've got 2 turntables which play our records and 4 cartridge machines which play commercials, album tracks, jingles, things like that. And these black knobs here are the volume controls for each thing, for the cart machines and turntables. The VU meter there, that's the one for what's going to air. The other one there, that's for queuing, so we can queue a record before we put it to air.
I see, yeah. So you got its volume right before it goes on?
Yeah. And you just have it peaking, just jumping about.
Do you think that maybe you're doing more work than Bob Rogers?
Definitely.
Do you think he's got it easy?
Oh no, Bob works fairly hard in his 3 hours on the air, because he's got to start very early in the morning to get material. Just hang on for a second.
Okay, let's get that. Right.
Very good.
A movie star, and that's Harpo. Well, it's 25 to 12. Stuart Wagstaff may not be a movie star, but he's starred in just about everything else. And I've been thinking of Stuart. In fact, I was hoping to be able to contact him on the phone, but he's not available. Regarding the banning of cigarette advertising on television and radio, Stuart is perhaps the quintessence of the image of the sophisticated man. And his image has gone a long way to sell Benson and Hedges cigarettes for years. He will still be able to make commercials for cinemas, but other than that, it must be a sad blow to Stuart, who I know has been paid very handsomely, rewarded handsomely as he should be, by the agency handling the Benson and Hedges accounts. But it must come as a bit of a blow on top of the demise of Celebrity Squares, on which he was a regular panellist. That finished up suddenly last week. And Help Your Neighbour didn't last too long. But there's one thing about Stuart. He's a survivor, and I'm sure he'll come up with something, even if suddenly he disappears from your screens, as he will do after today, as the Benson and Hedges man. We'll miss you, Stuart. On the last day of winter in Sydney, here's a song about winter in America. Doug Ashdown sings.
As you can see, sometimes Bob will play a record from his studio and not tell me about it.
Does it drive him mad sometimes?
Oh no, not really, because you get used to it after a while, all the things that happen, different things that, every day is completely different.
Yeah.
And sometimes he plays records from the studio, but I play most of the records. It's only if he doesn't have time to get it around to me or something like that.
Does he more or less select the records and give it to you, or the ones he selects does he play?
No, well, what happens, the system is that the record library, the musical director picks out the music for that morning, okay, and then if he wants to vary it and play a track of his own or something like that, he does that, but he only plays them from his studio if he doesn't have time to get around to me.
So in other words, the fellow in the record studio, the library,
yeah,
he actually picks the records.
Picks the music, yeah. Music's all picked for us, and we just come down. I come in at I get here about 8 o'clock and start getting the commercials out. All those, they're all commercials. I refile the previous shift that morning. Ian McRae's shift, I put his carts away, his commercials, and get mine out. Then by about 8:45, I'm right to go. I get the records from the library, kick Ian McRae out of here, and then come in and do mine. I go on the air at 9.
There's also can be a live studio.
Yeah, Stephen
camp.
McRae does his shift from here every morning. Plus Moore and Gibson do theirs from there. Ronnie Sparks does his shift from there. And sometimes they change studios at 6 and come back into here, or they'll go right through all night in that studio and change at 6 in the morning. Yeah, but Ian McRae always does his shift in here. So at 9 o'clock Bob can just come up and go in straight to the studio and start getting ready.
If you remember, the announcer's part at 2JJ was mainly to play the discs and fill in on air. There wasn't all that much involved, but the output was reasonable. However, 2SM is much more mature in its operations and is an established station. This fits well with the personality of Bob Rogers, to whom I had a chance to speak with.
Could I ask you what the aim of your show is?
I think it's just to entertain.
Do you feel that the show is needed?
Well, you've been in the business as long as I have. You know, you can always be done without. So I don't know that it's needed. I think it fulfills a role in a lot of people's lives out there. But if I weren't there, somebody else would, or they'd listen to somebody else. And I suppose we could do without radio, just as we could do without Bob Rogers. So I think people would miss it. Some people would miss it. Other people miss it all the time, according to the ratings.
Well, your show starts at 9 o'clock until 12, doesn't it?
Yes.
And wouldn't you say at this time normally the housewife would be listening?
Mostly, one expects that. Although I think I was the first to investigate the fact that I was the first about 10 years ago to start discussing things like football and racing and things like that, and not primarily cooking segments. But I really started that trend, I think, in 1964. But I do know that in a city as cosmopolitan as Sydney, there are a lot of men and a lot of shift workers, a lot of kids, a lot of students listening, so you try to make it all encompassing.
So you're trying to get everybody interested in your show, are you?
Well, you're trying to cut a wide range of people into your program.
Yeah. Wouldn't you say that, well, I've listened to your show a few times. You do...
I'm sorry, it's only a few times. You didn't get hooked. You didn't like it, eh?
No. It's just that I couldn't all see where it's cool, so... You know,
oh, that's true. Of course, yes.
So it's an honest mistake.
Yes.
You in terms, you know, like, you do assist the people who ring up sometimes, don't you? Like, a little like the Law Show. Would you say that?
I would say it's quite unlike the John Law Show, because I think we're quite unlike. We're always thought of together. I think it is much more responsible. I think I am much more responsible. I don't set myself up as your friendly family psychiatrist because I don't have training for it.
That's right.
I don't give medical advice. I try to help by suggesting, perhaps, but I don't think you could ring up and offer a solution to somebody who's mentally depressed or having a fight with her husband on the say-so of that one person. And I think the big difference is the word responsibility.
By taking it in your hands, you know, you could
well,
worsen it or...
I think some of the advice that's handed out off the top of the head by some people is irresponsible.
Do you find maybe that your job's a bit boring? Does it get boring after a while?
Well, I've been doing it for a long time, and there are many times I get up... Boring is probably not the word. It tends to jade you, because you get up in the morning and think, oh my God, what am I going to talk about for 3 hours today that can be diverse in its interests? You know, there are probably 15, 20, 30 subjects that I'll touch upon. Unlike John, for instance, I don't just take calls willy-nilly. I usually set up the subjects I want to talk about.
In other words, you do prepare your show.
Oh my gosh, do I prepare? Yes.
How much preparation is involved?
I get up at 6, I read the papers, I have a writer, I confer with him. I originally had the writer to save myself from lawsuits, because I used to get a lot of those from careless remarks. And I get here about 8:15, and I have a secretary who starts making calls, we think of people to talk to, etc. It's very busy, busy, busy.
But in the end, you still run the show your own way, don't you?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Does the station place any restriction on you?
This station places 2 restrictions, being the Catholic Church. We do not discuss the pill or abortion. Other than that, they're fairly liberal. Extremely liberal. And I'm a Protestant, to show you how liberal the Catholic Church is.
Do you have to, well, let's say, play a certain number of records through your show?
I don't have to, but you know the sort of programming format that you're trying to... You realise that a lot of people are listening to every word, hanging on every word,
That's right.
but also a lot of people are not, and you don't want to lose them. So you want them to, without them being aware of the psychology, to feel that every so often, even if they're bored with the particular subject you're discussing, as they will be, you know, you're obviously only hitting on certain wavelengths, that they will hear some music that they'll like. And I try to upgrade the number of records, for instance, during the school holidays, because a lot of kids are listening. They would rather have music than talk.
Yeah, that's true too. But do you think that your
The little monsters.
do you think that the listening audience has accepted you since you've come to 2SM, which was, I think, February this year, wasn't it?
Well, by the time you... I came in January. By the time you are showing this, we'll know, because there's another survey out this week. It appeared as though I was a gigantic success in the first survey and something of a failure in the second. So the most common complaint is that I don't suit the 2SM image, which of course was all rock and roll and up-tempo and frantic, and still is when I'm not on. They're trying to change it slightly. If the survey is bad again, it may prove that the whole thing is not working. But I shan't go off and cut my throat. I shall ring John Laws and he'll save my life.
Let's see. Do you think that personality or a bit of fame is a good ingredient for your show?
That's a funny question. I think personality, probably. The art of communicating is a very subtle one, I think, on radio. It must be, because there are very few who seem to have been able to achieve it. I don't know why. That's, I suppose, the reason that people think of John Laws and Bob Rogers, or Bob Rogers and John Laws, to get the billing correct, is that we've been able to communicate. And I can't really put my finger on that, because a lot of others have tried and they apparently don't make it. Fame, I think, is a fleeting thing, and I have a distinct disadvantage because I don't give much of myself to the public. Other than the fact that I married with 4 daughters and played tennis, the public doesn't know much about me, because I don't rush into the newspapers with my latest illness, which often isn't an illness. You know, if I get a headache, I just suffer it and take an Alka-Seltzer because it's a hangover. If my wife has a serious illness, and I'm serious about this, I do not run to the newspapers and get a banner, which I could. Radio star tragedy. Bob Rogers' wife has TB. That happened. My wife did have TB, but I most certainly would not prostitute my personal life or involve my kids in any of my public life, because that's important to me.
2SM were very kind to let us have a look at their transmitter. I spoke to Mr. Menes, who is a very well-established person of 2SM.
Well, you gentlemen have been to the studios. You know the system as it operates in the studios, and from the studios we have telecom lines that feed the program down to the transmitting site, which is this side. Now the telecom lines, they come in, and they come into this equipment here. We have 2 line amplifiers here, 1 and 2, and the levels are sent as from the studios. They get attenuated by about 40 dBs down the line, and these actually bring up the gain of the program to about +8. That is then fed into a limiting amplifier, this line amp being associated with that limiting amplifier, and this line amp being associated with this limiting amplifier. We then increase the gain, and we hold about 5 or 6 dBs of limiting in hand. Here we have a jack fill, which we can patch various aspects of lines and programs to various transmitters as we so require. These are fairly straightforward transmitters. This is a very old transmitter, by the way. It uses triodes in it. We've got modulator stage there, we've got the RF stage there, we've got the driver stage there with a crystal driver unit inside. And this is a power and control unit inside here. Metering is self-explanatory. In the case of this BDM5, it's completely transistorized up to the modulator stage and also the driver. is transistorized too. So we have the speech input goes into 1, 2, 3, 4, goes into 8 stages of transistorization, and then that drives the modulator tubes. Modulators are Class B, they're both Class B modulators. In the case of the RF side of this thing, we have 2 crystal oscillators which we can slit, and they are fed through various linear stages which drive the actual grids of the RF tubes, and it's quite a straightforward conventional type of transmitter. Insofar as its function is concerned, it's a bit more involved as far as the method we actually use the RF driver. I won't go into details of this because actually what in fact we do, we've got a sine wave oscillator there running at the carrier frequency, and this drives a flip-flop circuit, and it's split, and we get a phase shift across 2 flip-flop circuits, and one channel is delayed against the other one, and the 2 outputs are then put across an LC circuit, and you get a sine wave out. The theory of this being that you can get a fair amount of power in a very efficient way to drive your RF tubes. From the speech input equipment, the audio is fed into these 2 tubes here, which are the sub-mod we call. They then drive these 2 tubes here, 2 on each side of the push-pull circuit. They drive those, and they actually modulate these 2 tubes, which is the modulator tubes. Now, there's a feedback loop through these tubes. I'm sorry, I'm telling you wrong. The output of that goes through a cathode follower stage and drives the actual tubes of the modulator tubes. So what you've got is you've got your speech from there, goes into there, drives those 2, they drive those 2, cathode follower onto the tubes here. Okay?
Do you mind if I just get the light over here a bit? Playing number.
Alright?
Okay.
Now, we've described the modulator. Here we have the RF driver stage. This gives you the frequency you tune the set to, which is a crystal oscillator.
Yes.
With a control, up and control. That drives these 2 stages here, which are in parallel. The output of that drives this tube again, which is output is parallel to get the power, and the RF output of that drives these 2 outside. That one's a spare one. Drives those 2, which are also coupled in parallel together. So you've got 2. They're not push-pull, those aren't. They're just parallel operated, those tubes, and they output. This is the neutralising, which normally we don't have on there, but we've got neat coil there, being triodes, and these are the low voltage rectifiers for the 1800 volts and the 500 volt DC rail. And here we have the control unit, which controls the overload and protection unit. We made this, we designed this thing ourselves and made it up. Basically what it does, it operates triacs in the input to the power transformers in each case, so that if you get an overload, the triac is de-energized and takes this triac operates a contactor which takes the phase volts off the transformer, the HT transformer, so it's an automatic protection. We've got sensing resistances in each tube, and they're just little bleed resistances, and we take a bleed off each valve and we sense this bleed voltage, and this develops a current which controls the actual operating point of the triac. Now if you get an overload anywhere along the line here, this alters the operating condition, and it deactivates the triac. The triac deactivates, and obviously the coil being in series with the gate, with the control of the triac, it actually brings the solenoid, open circuit system, takes the power off there.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mr. Menes. Well, you've now seen the works of the two most popular radio stations in Sydney, and I hope that the information brought to you through this program has helped you in your field of study. But anyhow, until the next time we meet,